welcome to this, the 10th video in our beginner series tutorial. Today we will be discussing persistence. So when one talks about persistence, one needs to know a few things. One is that whenever a character or a player or anything decides to transition from one map to another, the previous map is getting destroyed and the new map is getting created from scratch. The exception for this would be streaming levels, but we're not going to cover that for today. What this means is that your player character or pawn that you have in one level is not the same one that you will have in a different level. The character or pawn you had will be destroyed on the level that you were on, and then it'll be loaded in on the second level. So that means you lose things like information about what kind of hit points he has, for example, or other types of information. So we can demonstrate this a little bit, because we have here the tutorial from previous tutorial about level traveling, and in this one you can see that we have this character. I'll link the tutorials down below if you want to follow along from the scratch. But here you see we have a health bar, for example, that shows us that we have currently 35% of our life. And we can go into this little square here, which is a teleporter, which brings us to a different map, and we still have 35 hit points. The problem is we don't really have 35 hit points. If we were to bring in a pain causing volume here and put it, let's say, over the 2 here, for example, and then hit play, and then we stand in it, nothing is happening. Did I not put it in properly? Alright, we need to have functionality for this. Don't we already though? That's not the event I want. I want the let's see, event any damage. Yes, okay, so we have that one. We're taking damage. We should be calling health updated. Okay, let's see. Well, what if we print from here and say damage taken? Let's just see if it works properly. Might be that we're yes, we're taking damage. Okay, where the health bar is moving. I was just not seeing it. But okay, so now we're taking damage. The health bar is going down. It's getting fairly low, and now it's down to like maybe a 10th or something like that. So if we were to go and travel to the different map now, you would see that our health bar goes back. That's because it does not persist through the level transition because of what we were just speaking of. And what you need to apply when it comes to things like this is the game instance. The game instance is something you can see if you go to settings and project settings, and then under maps and modes you have your default game modes and their default classes and things like that, but also in the bottom you have game instance class. And this is the class that by default handles everything in your game. The game instance class is the class that survives the whole session of gameplay that you do from start to end, which means that this is the class that you need to store information in if you want it to be transferred between instances where it would normally be destroyed, like for example when we transition to a different level. So to show this, we can start off with something like we create a new game instance class by clicking the plus sign here, and we put it in the blueprints. We can make a new folder here. We can call it tutorial 10 for me here, but you can name it whatever you want. And the class itself we can rename to bp underscore game instance, and then click OK. So now we're inside of the game instance class, and what we want to do is we want to have, for example, player health. And we'll make it a boolean because it is a boolean in our system. So the player health here is going to be default 0, and that's gonna be a slight problem, so we'll put this at 35 because our character starts with that, just to have you pass the initial problem of like, otherwise. Okay, the steps that you need to take to preserve your player's health through levels is that when you decide to transition to a new level, you need to first save your data that you want to have saved, that you need in the new level, and then when you reach the new level, you want to load that data to make sure that it's reflected everywhere where it's necessary. We're gonna have an instance, because we're just building a very hacky test right now, a situation where we can't load it initially if it's 0, because we're gonna put our load in our character. Whenever our character is created, it's gonna go and check, do I have information about my health, and then it's gonna put it in there. So if we have it at 0, it's never going to be updated with a proper information for us. So we'll put it for 35, just so you're aware. This is not the good way to do it, but you know why this is happening if you run into it later. So what we have is basically we need to have our teleporter. Our teleporter will decide that we will move to a level at some point here. So before we move to a level, we need to first make sure that we save our information. So we get health from our character. We get a game instance. And we cast this game instance to our BP game instance. And then we sort out the connections here so it looks okay. That's not what I wanted to do at all, but okay. There we go. Much better. And then we created a health that we did. Okay. And then we move our health node into there. Okay. So when we walk into one of these volumes now that would allow us to travel between worlds, it will now make sure to set the health that our player currently has into the game instance, and then it would open the world. Then when we open the world, our character will be destroyed and it will be recreated in a new world. So if we go back to our character now, and we go to its begin play, this might be a place where we could make use of this. So if we were to get the game instance here, cast it to our BP game instance, like so, and then we get its health, and then we set our own health to be whatever that value is. So now the flow should be, we get recreated in a new level, we get from the game instance what level we have saved there earlier, and we set it as our new health. Since this happens in the creation of the player, it will happen every time it's rebuilt in a new level, and since we have the saving of the player health in this case every time we're doing a teleport, that means that since we're using the same class of teleporting in both levels, as you will see soon, then it will work in all of these places, and it will make sure to save it properly before we leave. So, and again, if you have, we're gonna put ourselves in the pane volume here for a little bit. If you have not done the previous tutorials, that might be a good way if you want to have this built up to this point where we are currently, so you have all the files in the same states as we are right now. Anyway, we have now discovered that we have lost a lot of hit points, so we go through the teleporter. And it is actually reset to 35 again, which is weird. Let's see if we can troubleshoot this. Let's go into the volume. Yeah, okay. I figured it might be something like that. So you see here that by going into the volume, we actually see what our health is, and if we go in here it's just the HUD element that is being updated, but if we go into the volume it will show from where it's supposed to be. So what we have here is just a UI error for now. So to clean up the HUD element error that we're getting, it's two things. One, our health update is currently only happening whenever it is changed, which means that it's happening when we're taking pain volume damage. We would like to update this once when we construct it also. We can do that by getting the health and the max health from the player. And then making a mathematical division operation on them. So we get the health divided by the max health, which gives us a percentage of health, so we get that there. So that should fix it so that whenever it's created it gets a first tick as well to inform it about what its life is. But I do believe, yes, we're setting our HUD widget before we are actually getting our potentially updated life, which means that the HUD would still update incorrectly. So just to get that in the proper order, we can make sure to do the loading of the life, so to speak, a little bit earlier. Like so. Oh, okay. That got moved a bit. Let's do something like that. So we'll connect a pin from the connection there, and from here to set, and from set to create, and now it should probably be working fine in that regard. Let's just double check to see. Now while we're doing this we can talk about some other things. So this is good for making sure that your variables are properly persistent through your levels. Like you can see that it currently is now. We can move through several times and continue to lose our life. But there might be other things that you want to save as well, like things that are made on a selection screen on like the startup screen or something of that nature. So we can make a small example of that as well. We can make a map which we can call map 10, and we can go into this map and let's rename the text here so it says something more correct, and we can set it to go, actually we don't need that. So let's assume that this is supposed to be our game menu, our main menu when we start the game. So let's create a HUD for this. So we'll do a user interface widget start screen, and let's just make it really simple. We have a button which we want to be our start button, so we'll put some text in it that says start, and then we choose a better name to begin with, start game button, and we make a couple more buttons to be able to choose a difficulty setting, let's say. Difficulty setting is also something that you could possibly have on a menu screen, and then you wanted it to actually affect the world when you load up a map in some way. It could be like something that affects the enemy's lives, or in other ways determine things like that. So it might be something that you might want to have persistent as well. So let's put some texts in here. You did not want to go properly. Let's come on. Why does this one not want to move? We'll recreate it then. Does not want to be deleted either. Okay, that one has entered some dimension I don't know of. Anyway, let's leave it for now to keep this rolling. So we'll say this one is going to be a button that chooses hard difficulty. And this button here is something that's going to choose medium difficulty, let's say. Now again, since this sort of builds on a previous tutorial where we went through how enumerators work, we can reuse the enumerators. I'll leave a link to the video in case you want to go ahead and do that part. It's not that difficult though, so first we'll go back and rename the buttons though and choose not for the text, we want the button. We'll choose to call this a medium button, and we'll pick the other button and choose to call it the hard button. So all of these we need to have some events for. We need to have an on-click event for the hard button, we need to have one for the medium button, and we need to have one for the start button. And we're gonna be selecting a difficulty with these. So we will make a variable called difficulty and choose to make it of the type E difficulty in the enum that we created in the earlier tutorial. And we'll choose as a default to have it on easy. And then when we click on the medium button, what we want to do is we want to set the difficulty to be medium. And we want to set the difficulty when we click hard to be hard. That's all good and fine. However, then all this is gonna do is really just put this in this widget so that the widget knows what the difficulty is. That doesn't help us very much. First of all, because the widget should not be what remembers what difficulty you're on. It's the wrong place to have it. The character having what difficulty it is also something that seems wrong. So what we would more likely want to have it in is in a game mode. So if we were to make a blueprint, and you can do this in many ways, you can for example go over here to world settings, and then you see you have a game mode override here and a plus symbol here. Click a plus there, and we can go here and choose the same catalog and type difficulty game mode, let's call it. Then we'll go into that one and we'll make a variable here called difficulty. So this class will now contain difficulty. We should make sure it's of the same type, the enum that we had before. It can be default easy as well. And the next step is to make sure that we actually save this information. And a good place to do that will be when we press the start button. However, there's not much point in saving it while we are on this level, because we are going to be leaving this level rather immediately when we press the start button. So we will just be getting a game state. No, sorry, game instance. Because this is where we persistently save our things through. Cast it to a BP game instance. And then we need to save it in the instance. But we do not have a variable for it in game instance right now. We only have player health. So we'll make a difficulty here. And we'll make it an enum of difficulty again. And it again can have whatever difficulty as default as it wants. It doesn't matter because we will be saving over it. Now you might be thinking, well, why are we doing it this way? Why are we setting the difficulty here in the game instance and in the game mode? Well, it's a matter of putting things where they sort of belong, right? Game instance, you can reason that since you're already saving the information in game instance, you might as well keep it there. And that is in the end up to you. If you want to have it that way, you can have it that way. It's a matter of creative choice. one could make an argument for that the game mode class is the class that's supposed to have the game rules, and difficulty is something that sounds sort of like a rule, which means that it might be contextually proficient of you to put it there, because then if someone else was to look for difficulty, they might find it natural to look in the game mode class first to see if the difficulty is available there to look for. And also the difficulty might be something that possibly changes, and you might be updating it in the game mode but not updating in the game instance until just before leaving a level or something of that nature as well. Which means that you might be getting a difficulty that's out of sync or something like that possibly. But on the other hand, if you only had it in the game instance, then you wouldn't have it out of sync because this would be the only place you update it. So again, it's a matter of choice, of course. Anyway, we're supposed to open a level here. So we're going to take one of the levels that we have made earlier in the previous tutorial. We'll check this tutorial 1 map here, and we'll say that once we click on the start button here on this map, we will open the level to this map instead. And what we can do also is, if we, for example, are using the same game mode in both of these maps, so if we were to go to map here and click on difficulty game mode and save that, and also go to our tutorial map here and make difficulty game mode, both of these have the same game mode, so we could go to our game mode class and say here whenever it's loading or being constructed, because game mode is also being deconstructed when you leave a level, right? So by getting a game state, game instance here, casting it to our game instance, setting the difficulty of the game mode to whatever this one has as difficulty. Then we'll make sure that whenever we load up the game mode, it will make sure to first set the difficulty to whatever has been saved in the game instance. Now we as players, we don't have a way of actually showing what kind of difficulty it is currently, so let's just put in a input on our character so that we can do that. And I've already done it over here. You can see on the Q key I will get difficulty, but that's currently only on a local player, and that's not really what we want to have. What we want to have is from the game mode. So we get game mode and then we cast it to difficulty game mode. And from there we get its actual difficulty and we type it out, like so. So now then, in theory, if we start on this map here, we also need to make one more change here, because this is supposed to be our menu. We need to go to the level blueprint of the 10 map for me, the one I call 10 map, the one that's the menu map. Because we want to have a begin play event here as well, just to say whenever someone starts on this map, what we want to do is we want to create a widget and we want to make it of the W start screen. So when the map is created, throw up this HUD on the player's view basically, like so. Player, like so, and we also want to show mouse here just in case. Make sure we have a mouse available for us when we navigate this menu. Okay, so let's go through this then. So we click play. We get our not very pretty, there's our text also that disappeared. Anyway, we get our buttons here now that we have. One which these two should set our difficulty, and we can press Q right now and it will say easy because that's the default. So if we press medium now here and press Q, it's still saying easy. Okay, well, that makes sense because we chose to omit saving it to the game mode, right? We said since we will be leaving immediately after setting, so there was no point to it. So this one is only setting it locally, so that's why that doesn't show up. But once we click start here now, then we have been transported to a new map, and it should have loaded the information from the game instance into the game mode, and when we now press Q, we're gonna get the information that medium has been chosen as the difficulty because we're getting it from the game mode, which got it from the game instance when the game mode was created on this level. And if we continue to jump on a different level now here, we're in a different level and we still get that. Okay, that's interesting. We're shooting bolts. Right, in this map we do not get the message, and that is because in this map we do not have the same game mode as the other one. So if we were to look here, we have the first person game mode, and the game mode is where we store the information about the difficulty. So if we save this one, we go back to the menu again and do this over again, and we choose hard this time, and then play. We have transported into the 9.1 map. It says hard in the top left corner. We go through another map. We're on the 9.2 map. We press Q and it says hard. So the problem here you saw was that we were using the game mode to save. So if we have different game modes, we need to handle this slightly differently or make sure that all different game modes get that information if it's relevant to them. Or like we talked about earlier, if you choose to have the information in the game instance instead, you can get it from the game instance instead and you won't have this particular issue. It might be a bit more convenient, but it might be a little bit more messy, depending on how you want to structure your project, of course. It's up to you. I hope this clarified this situation a bit about how game instances and persistence is used. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you did not like it, leave a dislike. Leave any suggestions or comments you have down below. Subscribe and share this video if you want to see more like it in the future. In the next video we will be talking about game modes and related items. That is all for now. Keep on learning.